In this lesson, we're going to talk about communicating with and via the media, newspapers, TV, radio, blogs, internet, and so on. We're going to discuss why you should do it, and why you shouldn't in some cases, different forms of media, what's a good one to use, how you deal with journalists. They're a very different tribe of people to scientists, some of the media biases, and the trickiest issue of all, how you deal with the media when you're looking at contested issues like climate change. So first of all, why should you communicate with the media at all? Why not just do your science, advance human knowledge? Well, if like me you're a pure scientist doing something with little commercial use, astrophysics in my case, you're trying to justify your funding. Why should anyone fund astronomy? It's because it's advancing the frontiers of human knowledge. But if no one learns about our research, what's the point? If it's just science, if you publish papers that are read by 5 other people in the world, why should government fund you? Why should scientists be supported? It's a crucial part of your role in fields like astronomy to spread the knowledge. That's what you're doing it for. If humans don't learn what you've done, in some sense you haven't done it. It's not enough to publish a paper that, as I said, is typically read by very few people. So there's, I think, a moral obligation in many forms of the sciences to actually spread it via the media and other ways. That's not so much the case if it's something very practical. If you're trying to work out a better way to manufacture a certain type of silicon chip, then your output is not public awareness, but better silicon chips. But if you're doing particle physics or astrophysics, then telling the people about what you're doing, what you've learned about the origin and nature of the universe, is a crucial part of your job and deserves a lot more effort than it normally gets. Then communicating with the media is a way to influence governments and businesses through the general public. If you're going to go to the government to ask for a new telescope, it helps if they've seen the latest news stories. You might have a sense of national pride that your country is building great rockets or discovering great things, and therefore be more willing to fund you. If you're trying to partner with a business to build something, it helps if they've heard of you because they've seen you in the media and they know you're sensible, good people. And it's also crucial for recruiting employees and students. People might apply for a job with you if they've seen you in the media lots of times and know that you're doing good research. Students will come if they've seen your blog posts or your stories. And then there are the contentious issues like climate change. If you don't fight in the media to show people that this is a real serious issue, then the fossil fuel companies will win. So it's not enough just to lobby politicians. In most democratic countries, you have to get public opinion on your side. So it is important to communicate with the media. Now, what sort of media? I like to think of there being a spectrum of forms of communication. This graph is my own personal spectrum. I've looked at the different ways I interact with educating people in the world. And I've tried to work out how many hours I get per person versus the number of people. So at one extreme is PhD supervision. I only supervise a very small number of PhD students, but I get those students full-time for 3 years. That's a lot of hours, so I'm having hopefully a huge influence on them, but there aren't very many of them. Down the opposite extreme is something like giving a TV interview. I've done a lot of these things, TV interviews on ABC News or other news channels. Here you might be seen by several million people, depending which country you're in, maybe even hundreds of millions of people if it goes around the world. But a TV interview and the TV news is unlikely to last more than a minute, maybe a minute 15 seconds, absolute tops. So you're not getting very much of the time and you can't teach them very much. Then there are things in the middle, like radio interviews. You might get a bit longer for radio Q&A, but it meets fewer people. And teaching undergraduate classes, where, once again, it's a smaller number of people for more hours. Which of these is best? Well, they all have their role. You probably should do all of these things. My personal figure of merit is person hours. Just work out how many people you've influenced and how many hours you've done it for. So this is my estimate of my impact. So that I multiply the number of people by the number of hours. And for me, undergraduate teaching wins quite heavily because I teach large numbers of courses and have done so for many decades. Um, TV interviews still reach more people, but that's smaller, small amount of time each. That's with traditional media. Of course, nowadays we have social media of various forms, and these are somewhat different. Here I've added in two forms of my interaction with untraditional media. I teach MOOCs, massive open online courses, free online courses offered via online platforms, and my MOOCs have been taken by over 500,000 students, though the average student drops out after about the first 20 minutes. So I can add those to the graph. I've also produced a whole series of viral YouTube videos, mostly about greatest unsolved mysteries of the universe, which have been viewed about 2 million times. So if we factor those in, they actually completely trash radio interviews and TV interviews in times of impact. The number of person hours is much higher, and in fact for my YouTube videos it's more people than a typical TV show. So there are new opportunities. If you do it right, you can reach a lot of people very effectively via these social media, though I won't talk too much about that because there's a vast number of web pages and YouTube videos about how to go viral. But it is something you should very much take account these days. So this is usually a choice you have. What do you do if you want to reach people? And this depends a lot on what you're trying to achieve. To think of another example, let's imagine you're a startup company and you've got some new technology and you might be a new type of software, a new app, or a new laser guided hair remover, who knows what, and you want to get the news out there. Of course, the traditional way, paid advertising. And even here there's a spectrum. You can reach a lot of people by paying a lot of money, for example, a Super Bowl TV ad, or you can have a targeted thing, home hair removers weekly, or social media, which allows you to target things, again at a cost. Then there's free media coverage. If you make something exciting enough, you can get free coverage. This is Donald Trump's speciality, that by being totally outrageous, the media feels obliged to cover him, so he gets lots of media coverage for being obnoxious without having to pay for it. Or maybe that's not who you want to reach. Maybe you just want to persuade a few key people in government. This might be a more important strategy in countries like China or Russia, in which case you might be better off spending your money on lobbyists or otherwise targeting key public servants. And many startup companies, this is the way to do it. Far better to sell to 5 people if you're selling for $100 million each, rather than blanketing the country with ads for things that sell for $1 each. So it is a choice, and you should think about it. Who do you want to reach? Is it a small amount of attention for a large number of people, or vice versa? These are all possibilities.